a strange contradiction. From the outside, they may seem quiet, or even confused, but internally, their mind is moving faster than their environment can keep up with. Psychologists often avoid simple labels for this, because it's not just intelligence in the traditional sense. It's something more subtle, a combination of awareness, sensitivity, and deep pattern recognition. Neuroscience suggests that some children develop with higher neural responsiveness, which means their brain reacts more intensely to smaller stimuli. A sound that others ignore feels louder. A change that others miss feels significant. An emotion that others dismiss feels real. And over time, this creates a very specific type of behavior. Not obvious, not always rewarded, but extremely consistent, once you know what to look for. Because these children don't think in straight lines, they think in layers. And when that happens early in life, the signs don't always look like intelligence. Sometimes, they look like something else entirely. Here are the first signs that your child may have an unusual form of intelligence that most people fail to recognize. The first sign is something many parents notice, but rarely understand. Your child reacts to things you didn't even say. They sense shifts in your mood before your words change. A slight pause in your voice, a different tone, a silence that lasts a little too long. While most people focus on what is visible, they are already processing what is subtle. This isn't imagination. It's sensitivity combined with pattern recognition, and it often shows up long before they can explain it. The second sign is their attention to small inconsistencies. They notice when something is slightly out of place. A routine that changes by just a few minutes. An object that moved slightly. A behavior that doesn't match what usually happens. To others, it feels irrelevant. To them, it feels important. Because their brain is constantly trying to understand how things fit together. And when something doesn't match, they don't ignore it. They pause. The third sign is the way they respond to situations. Or more precisely, the way they don't respond immediately. In moments where other children react quickly, they hesitate. They observe. They watch everything unfold before deciding what to do. This can look like insecurity, or even confusion. But in many cases, it's the opposite. They are processing multiple possibilities at the same time, and choosing not to react too quickly. The fourth sign appears in the questions they ask. Not just frequent questions, but deeper ones. Questions that don't stop at the surface. They don't just want to know what something is. They want to know why it exists, why it works the way it does, and what would happen if it changed. Sometimes, their questions feel uncomfortable, because they touch on things most people don't usually think about. And they don't ask once. They keep going, until the answer makes sense to them. The fifth sign is something many parents mistake for a problem. Your child gets mentally exhausted faster than others. Not because they are weak, but because they process more information in the same amount of time. Their mind rarely slows down, even in quiet moments. Especially in quiet moments. And over time, this creates a need to withdraw, to be alone, to reduce the noise. What looks like isolation is often recovery. At this point, some of these signs may already feel familiar. But the next ones go even deeper, because they don't just show how your child thinks. They reveal how your child experiences the world. The sixth sign is their reaction to unfairness. Your child doesn't just notice when something is wrong. They feel it deeply. A small injustice that others would ignore can stay with them. A scene in a cartoon. A situation at school. Something that feels off. And instead of moving on, they carry it. They think about it. They try to understand why it happened. Because for them, fairness is not just a rule. It's something internal, something that needs to make sense. The seventh sign is their discomfort with superficial interaction. They struggle with conversations that feel empty. Small talk doesn't hold their attention. Repeating the same social patterns feels tiring. Not because they don't want connection, but because they are looking for something deeper, even if they don't yet know how to express it. The eighth sign is the way their imagination works. It's not just creativity, it's construction. They build scenarios in their mind. They simulate possibilities. They think about things that haven't happened, as if they were real. And sometimes, they get lost in that internal world. Not because they're distracted, but because their mind is actively exploring. The ninth sign is something many parents worry about. Your child doesn't fully fit in. They can interact. They can adapt. But something always feels slightly out of sync, as if they are observing the group, instead of being completely part of it. And over time, they may start to notice that difference themselves, which can create a quiet sense of distance. The 10th sign is how they handle simple situations. What seems obvious to others becomes complex for them. A small decision turns into multiple possibilities. A simple comment turns into layers of interpretation. Because their mind doesn't stop at the first answer, it keeps going, looking for something more accurate, more complete, even when it's not necessary. And when you put all of this together, a pattern starts to emerge, not of difficulty, but of intensity. If you recognize these signs, then you're already seeing something most people overlook. Because what looks like too much is often a mind that is processing more than it was ever taught how to handle. And that changes the role of the parent completely. Because now, it's no longer about correcting behavior. It's about understanding the system behind it. Having a child with unusual intelligence is not always easy to recognize, because it rarely looks like what people expect. It doesn't always show up as high grades, or fast answers, or obvious talent. Sometimes, it shows up as silence, as hesitation, as questions that don't seem to have an end, or emotions that feel stronger than they should. And that's where most misunderstandings begin. Because the world tends to reward what is visible. Quick responses, clear behavior, predictable patterns. But a mind that processes in depth doesn't always move in those directions. It takes longer. It questions more. It resists simple explanations. And because of that, it can be misread, not as advanced, but as problematic, not as aware, but as sensitive, not as intelligent, but as too much. And over time, that misunderstanding can shape how the child sees themselves. They start to adjust, to simplify, to hide parts of how they think, just to feel accepted. And that is where something valuable begins to fade. Not because it was wrong, but because it was never understood. The truth is, a child like this doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be interpreted. They need someone who doesn't rush their process. Someone who doesn't silence their questions. Someone who can see beyond the behavior and recognize the pattern behind it. Because when that happens, something shifts. The same traits that once looked like difficulty start to become clarity. The same intensity that felt overwhelming starts to become direction. And the same mind that seemed out of place finds where it belongs. So maybe the question is not whether your child is different. Maybe that part is already clear. The real question is, what will you do with that understanding? Will you try to shape them into what is expected? Or will you learn how to support what is already there? Because the way you answer that may define how far that mind can go. If this made you see your child in a different way, subscribe for more.